Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Let's Have Renaissance, a podcast about literature and the arts. I am Ito Otini.
And I'm Makaya Otini, and today we're speaking with Ron Nyren. Ron is the author of The Book of Lost Light, a novel set during the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco, published by Black Lawrence Press in 2020. His stories have appeared in the North American Review, the Paris Review, the Mississippi Review, the Missouri Review, and elsewhere. We're excited to be with him today.
Thank you for tuning in. We're excited that you're here. Why don't you also subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends?
And if you know anyone who wants to come on the podcast, please do send them our way. Also, if you haven't yet, sign up for our free newsletter where we share updates, resources, and opportunities. To support the podcast, you can make a one-time donation through our website or purchase a subscription to our blog where you'll find more premium content and resources at thedatekeepers.com. Thank you for being a part of our community.
Ron, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. Can you please tell us about yourself and what are you working on now?
Thank you so much. I am a fiction writer, novels and short stories. I'm a creative writing instructor, and I'm also a freelance journalist focusing on architecture, urban design, sustainability, resilience, and affordable housing. When my oldest brother was 14, he started drawing his own comic books, and I was 3 years old. I wanted to do everything my oldest brother did, so I did too, and I had him fill in the word balloons since I couldn't read or write, and just did this with him for 2 years. And then at 16, he decided that he wanted to move on to other things, and he gave it up, and I was so sad. I vowed never to give it up. So I kept drawing comic books until I was about 15, and I had an opportunity to study creative writing. And I thought, well, you know, what I really love is the storytelling part. So yeah, ever since then, it's been fiction writing. My drawing skills were sketchy at best. I'm currently working on a novel set in the Bronze Age. It's a retelling of the Greek myths of Ariadne, Icarus, and the Minotaur as a queer love triangle that runs afoul of the Minoan Empire.
And why historical fiction? I mean, not everyone is quite so ambitious to tackle the Bronze Age as a setting and a subject. So how did you decide that you were going to do that? And how important is it to you, since you're working also in the realm of myth, how important is it that you get the historical details right? And how much are you focused on the story as a retelling of a myth? And by contrast, how much are you focused on the story as an actual realistic representation of life in the Bronze Age?
Is a great question, and is one that I thought would be easy. My first novel, The Book of Lost Light, is set in the early 1900s San Francisco. I live in the Bay Area. I've lived in San Francisco. I live across the Bay now. Part of it is set in Berkeley. It's a stone's throw from where I am. So with that, I just felt a great responsibility to get the history right. I would attend events at the Berkeley Historical Society and visit them and obsessively pore over the newspapers that they had in their archive from 1906 earthquake. And I just thought, you know, I would hate for someone in the Berkeley Historical Society to read my novel and think, oh, he got that detail wrong. So I knew the area so well from having lived here since the early 90s. So it was really important. It was a love letter to the area. And I wanted to get the history so exactly right that even if my story might have been easier to write in certain instances, I figured out workarounds to keep the historical accuracy correct. And then when I was thinking of writing a novel set in mythic times, I thought, well, that'll be easier. We don't have recorded history, so I can just make things up. This will be so easy. But then I got to wonder, you know, it's one of the settings is the Palace of Knossos in Crete. Almost all the action takes place in Crete, some of it in Athens. We do have a reconstruction of the Palace of Knossos by the archaeologist Arthur Evans. So, you know, I could learn something about it, you know, get this book about Crete and what did people live in when they were in Athens, you know, what kind of dwellings. I was just curious. This led me down a rabbit hole, and I'm trying to be less obsessive than I was with the first novel. So I'm trying to be realistic, and whenever I can find details from the archaeological records, from speculations of scholars and historians, I'll include that if it serves the story. But I'm not worried about archaeologists reading my book and saying, you got this detail wrong.
It's fiction after all.
It's fiction after all, and it's myth. There's so many mysteries about how people live their lives.
And how did you become interested in myths? Because, you know, a lot of schools do not teach that kind of history.
Yeah. As a child, I was about a 10-minute walk from our local library. So I would go down there once I could go on my own or with my best friend. and just check out all kinds of books. From a very early age, I loved myths of every stripe, folk tales, Norse myths, Greek myths, any kind of myth. I just loved the fantasticness of it, the larger-than-life characters. I can't remember a time when I didn't love the myths. And even when I think about my oldest brother's obsession with comic books, there are contemporary kind of mythology in which you have these characters, sometimes with great powers, and yet there are still moments when they're challenged by catastrophe, where they can't control the narrative. And I feel like that's part of the fascination of myths, especially now when humanity has given itself so much power with technology, and yet we have so little control over so much.
I mean, myths are important in our daily lives, whether we like it or not. Even, as individuals, we've created our own myths of how the world works. We just don't think about them as such.
Yeah, some writers would say that the early peoples developed these myths as a way to understand the natural world. Why is there lightning? Oh, it must be a god hurling lightning bolts. And that might have been the case, but I also think they're just a ways to understand human nature and the human condition. We are powerless in the face of terrible storms. We are powerless in the face of those who have greater wealth and might than us. And even those people who have the most wealth and the might are themselves subject to all kinds of catastrophe. So I just really love the myths for dramatizing what it's like to be human in the dark, vulnerable. We evolved as prey. And even though we have developed all these powers at heart, we are so vulnerable.
And what are the particular psychological problems that you're dealing with in the current novel in progress? I mean, every myth has a range of internal experiences that it represents, and then there are other internal experiences that fall outside the scope of that particular myth. So you've chosen the myth of Ariadne and the Minotaur. Why that one, and why is it particularly suitable for the problems that were preoccupying you?
It started with Daedalus. I went to see a play in San Francisco in about 2010. It was a one-woman play about Ariadne. And it was marvelous, poetic, compelling. It made me get in touch with these particular myths again, because I had so many questions after seeing the play. And I went back and read the myths, and there were so many holes in the story that myth tellers can get away with a sentence or two, but a novelist in dramatizing, would have to really think through. So I started to turn the story over my head, those questions I had. And I started by being just very compelled by the figure of Daedalus, who was born in Athens, according to the myths, and was exiled for the crime of killing his nephew. He was jealous of his nephew's prowess as an inventor, outstripping his own reputation, and sent to Crete, where he was employed by the king Minos and got sort of swept up in these machinations of first King Minos's wife Pasiphae comes to him. She's been enchanted by the gods to desire the white bull that belongs to Minos. So Daedalus helps her, according to the myths, and thus the Minotaur is born. And then later, King Minos comes to Daedalus and says, build me a labyrinth to contain the Minotaur. And he does so. And then King Minos goes to war against Athens, the very home country that Daedalus was born in, grew up in, I'm guessing had a strong attachment to despite his exile. And Minos demands tributes, 14 youths from Athens, to come back with him to Crete. And he feeds them to the Minotaur, essentially. He traps them in the labyrinth, and the Minotaur kills them all. So I was just compelled by what it would be like to be Daedalus and his son Icarus, these Athenians who are in exile. These great inventions are being used against his own people to cause these terrible deaths. So I just wondered, what would it be like to be Daedalus? What would it be like to be Icarus? That feeling of complicity. On the one hand, your technologies are presumably helping the population. On the other hand, they're being misused to kill people and cause terror in the populace. So that's where it started. And then I thought about Ariadne growing up, daughter of King Minos, this tyrant from all the legends. According to the myths, she falls in love with Theseus, this Athenian. One of the tributes one year happens to be the son of the king of Athens, and Theseus wins her heart, according to the myths, and she betrays her father. She goes to Daedalus and says, how can I help Theseus escape the labyrinth after he kills the Minotaur, because he's this mighty hero? And Daedalus does so. So Ariadne is, in essence, betraying her father out of her love for Theseus. She's helping Theseus kill her own half-brother.
So in your version, did Daedalus actually kill his nephew, or is it an accusation that is unfounded?
Oh, good guess. Yes, I thought it would be very hard to have much sympathy for Daedalus if he killed his nephew. So I imagined that this was a tale told later for political reasons. So I was thinking about complicity. I was thinking about what it's like to be trapped in systems where desire is always trying to break free. And yeah, I was thinking about myth and the ways that the official version of stories may or may not accurately reflect reality.
Have you explored myths from other parts of the world or mainly Greek myths?
In my first novel, my characters are fascinated by Finnish myths. None of it was autobiographical, so I thought, well, what should my background of my characters be? I could make them Swedish American. I'm Swedish American. Since nothing else is autobiographical, I'll make them Finnish American, in homage to one of my favorite writers of all time, Tove Jansson, whose Moomin Troll books made her famous, but her books for adults are also just mind-blowingly awesome. So I thought, all right, well, Tove Jansson wasn't around in the early 1900s. What else do I know about Finland? And the one thing I knew was a memory from my childhood when I was about 8 years old, reading a book of folk tales. I remembered an illustration. This was a book of myths from all over about Wainamoinen, the great Finnish hero. And all I remembered was the name, really, and he was in a copper boat. So I Googled it and found out he was a character in this compendium of myths called the Kalevala. It's known as Finland's epic poem. It was compiled in the mid-1800s by a district health officer named Elias Lönnrot. And he just took all these myths. He went around recording stories from oral storytellers about the ancient heroes of Finland and sort of tried to create something like the Odyssey by mashing them together and trying to make a coherent story out of them. And I was just fascinated by the strangeness of the characters, the melancholy of their tale. So much goes wrong for these heroes, and yet there's something poignant about their perseverance.
And can you tell us about your publishing journey? What has it been like? And do you have any advice for our listeners?
I worked on this book for an embarrassingly long time. And while I was doing so, friends of mine from my MFA program, from the Bay Area literary scene writers group, published novels. And so I watched their journeys and decided I would take my time and try to get the novel just as done as possible. And I thought, well, I know so much from watching other people's literary journeys that, again, I thought it would be easier than it would be if I had come to it in my early 20s. And I first tried major publishers, and then when that didn't turn out as I'd hoped, I looked around for independent presses and discovered the amazing small press world and entered a few contests and semifinals for one and a finalist for another, and then it won the Big Moose Prize that Black Lawrence Press gives every year. And that was an amazing journey, just a really beautiful press. They've just published amazing books, and I've gotten to know some of the authors. Some of them become friends, and they've just done a beautiful job of the book. I love the cover. I love the attention to the physical aspect of it. They're so just kind and thoughtful people.
I'm actually kind of eager to hear a reading. Do you have an excerpt prepared for us?
Yes, I do. This excerpt comes about 6 days after the 1906 earthquake has destroyed the home of Joseph, our narrator, and his father and his teenaged cousin, who has essentially been his other parent as his own mother has died. So they're fleeing San Francisco to go to Berkeley, where they're camping, just started camping in the backyard of the father's patron, Mr. Hallgarten, along with some other refugee artists. This actually happened in Berkeley, is that many Berkeley and East Bay people took in folk, sometimes complete strangers, and they lived in backyard tents, they lived in people's attics and basements. In this case, they have previously known the Hallgartens. And all you really need to know about this scene is that Joseph is sitting on a balcony with Thomasine, Mr. Hallgarten's daughter, who is about the same age as he is, 15. Thomasine seemed content to sit with me, and so we stared at the city across the bay as its blackened ruin slowly disappeared in the twilight. I leaned closer to her, as if to get a better look at the city, but it was her profile that I studied. How had I not seen before how beautiful she was? "Do you ever wonder?" she said, then stopped. I was trying to formulate some sort of compliment about her eyelashes when a noise came from the yard below. We stood. A figure approached the house, moving uncertainly, tracking back and forth as if correcting course. A man I didn't recognize. Right before he was about to go out of sight beneath us, he stopped, swayed, and fell. "Mama!" Thomasine cried, bolting into the living room. I followed her down the stairs and out the door. She leaned over the man lying with his face in the grass and turned him over. His eyes were closed. He wore a long greatcoat with a singed hole in the front large enough to put a hand through. His hat had fallen off, revealing a considerable mass of long black hair. Mud caked his shoes and trousers, and the reek of earth and whiskey came off him. Thomasine ran into the house. I thought to get her mother, but instead she returned carrying a vase of flowers. She yanked out the bouquet and upended the water over his face. I admired her quick thinking. He sputtered and gave a shout, half rising on one elbow. A flower stem, blackened and flattened by rot, clung to his stubbled cheek. He wiped his face and looked around, groggy. After a moment, he extended his fingers toward Thomasine. She set the vase down, as if she thought he wanted her help getting up, but instead he grasped the flowers by their heads. She let go, and their stems reluctantly released from her palm. "You need to get that hand looked after, darling," he said. She held up her palm in the moonlight. Beads of blood appeared where thorns had dug in. "I didn't notice they were roses," she said. Mrs. Hallgarden came out and sent Thomasine back into the house, eyeing the vase as if the man had been caught thieving. I explained what had happened, irritated to have my moment with Thomasine broken. "You smell of whiskey," Mrs. Hallgarden told the man. He struggled up. "My name is Nicholas Forrester," he said, "and the whiskey is, in this case, more medicinal than diversionary." He lifted his hands in the air, showing us they were scraped and swollen. Under Mrs. Hallgarden's scrutiny, he seemed to sober up. He said that he'd crossed to Berkeley on Friday and spent a damp night in the university baseball field, jammed in a small tent with 5 Scotsmen. He'd come across the newspaper's list of refugees staying in Berkeley and saw his friends, the Vissers and the Crowleys, who were at the Hallgardens. Before he could leave, soldiers commandeered him to help them dig latrines for the camp. 3 hours later, they let him go, and the Scots shared some of their whiskey. "I'm sorry to have collapsed of exhaustion on your lawn, and I'm grateful to the girl for the dash of fetid water to the face." His voice was a raspy baritone. At the time, I assumed the inhalation of smoke had changed his tone temporarily, but as long as I knew him, he never lost that slight vibration in his vocal cords, which seemed to give his voice an extra timbre. He stood, dignified, unpleading, his wet head cocked as if listening to a far-off music. Mrs. Hallgarden sent me to fetch Peter, who expressed delight to see him. "He's an actor," Peter told her. "You have to forgive him if he can't help making a dramatic entrance."
Very nice.
Thank you. Love it. Thank you so much, and keep us up to date with the novel, and maybe you can come back on the podcast once it's published.
Thank you. Well, it's just been a great pleasure, and I'm just so enjoying listening to the episodes you've already recorded. And I look forward to seeing what comes next.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Take care.
You too.
You too. Happy writing.
Thank you. You too.